Welcome back to the Deep Dive, the place where we take the source material you've shared and turn it into pure, highly concentrated knowledge. We don't just read the material, we dissect it, we look for the surprising details, and we give you the full, unvarnished context you need to be truly well-informed.
And today, we are diving into a monumental figure whose life was arguably his greatest, most volatile work of art. We are discussing the Mexican master of the fresco, Diego Rivera.
That's right, Diego Rivera.
Yeah.
If you know one name in 20th century Mexican art, it is probably his. He's the painter whose immense frescoes not only define the entire Mexican mural movement, but really, they fundamentally shaped how the world perceives the nation's post-revolutionary identity. He is, to this day, a certified national treasure, with his works formally declared monumentos históricos by the Mexican government.
It is truly remarkable, isn't it, how an artist becomes so synonymous with a nation's core identity, especially when that artist was such a relentless provocateur. The complexity of Rivera, for me, lies in this constant tension. How he achieved this monumental status while being an ardent, an uncompromising communist, a militant atheist who courted controversy at every single turn, and a figure whose personal life was often just defined by emotional chaos.
And our mission today is to unpack that exact contradiction using your sources as our map. We need to understand how this relatively well-connected artist from Guanajuato became the global, radical voice of the downtrodden, often using really shocking methods to make his philosophical points.
And we have some incredible nuggets to explore. We'll get into his complex ethnic heritage and how he leveraged it, that technical brilliance of his shift from Parisian Cubism to monumental fresco, the detailed symbolism within his key Mexican works, and of course the profound political drama that led to the destruction of his most famous American commission by the Rockefellers.
And we absolutely have to talk about the bizarre details from his autobiography, including those truly shocking, factually suspect claims about engaging in cannibalism. We really have to analyze the philosophical and political motivation behind that kind of self-mythologizing.
We do. But as you said, to set the stage for a life so expansive, so contradictory, and so monumental, we have to begin with the full name, which is itself a piece of performance art.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
We're discussing Diego María de la Concepción, Juan Nepomuceno Estanislao de la Rivera y Barrientos Acosta y Rodríguez.
Wow.
That spectacular layered name, just dripping with historical and regional weight, is the perfect prelude to a man who contained multitudes.
Absolutely.
So let's unpack this enormous life. Starting in Guanajuato on December 8, 1886, he's born to María del Pilar Barrientos and Diego Rivera Acosta, who were, as the sources note, a well-to-do couple.
Right.
This background immediately challenges that idea of Rivera as a purely self-made, struggling, revolutionary artist.
It absolutely does. His earliest biography suggests a certain ease, a certain level of comfort, though his childhood was touched by tragedy. He had a twin brother, Carlos, who died at the age of 2. And what's fascinating is the psychological timeline here. It was only a year after that loss, around age 3, that Rivera began drawing, just constantly drawing.
And his parents, instead of punishing him for drawing on the walls, which I think most parents would do,
Right.
they facilitated it.
They absolutely fostered his artistic inclination. They installed chalkboards and canvases on the walls of their home to encourage him. I mean, this early, almost sanctioned prodigy status is so crucial to understanding him.
In what way?
He was given freedom and immense validation for his vision from the very start. He developed a confidence that he then carried into every subsequent political and artistic confrontation. He learned early on that his creative impulse was more powerful than institutional rules.
It's fascinating how that early, that sanctioned freedom to draw on the walls later manifests in his refusal to ever restrict the scale or the content of his public art.
Exactly.
But his identity was perhaps even more layered than his parents' wealth. The sources detail a staggeringly complex ancestry.
He was a synthesizer not just of art movements, but of lineages. He claimed Spanish, Amerindian, African, Italian, Russian, and Portuguese descent. But the most politically charged claim he made was about his Jewish heritage.
Okay, so this is where we really need to look critically at the sources. He wrote in 1935, and this is a direct quote, "My Jewishness is the dominant element in my life," claiming it gave him a direct sympathy with the downtrodden masses.
What's so fascinating here is the timing and the nuance of that claim. His mother, María del Pilar Barrientos, was indeed said to have Converso ancestry.
And for anyone who doesn't know, converso means Spanish ancestors who were forced to convert from Judaism to Catholicism centuries ago during the Spanish Inquisition.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But Rivera himself was not raised within the faith, nor did he practice it.
And wait, the sources also suggest he rarely mentioned this publicly until the mid-1930s, which is exactly when his communist politics needed powerful historical alignment. So, was this authentic heritage, or was it political expediency used to align with his narrative of the historically oppressed?
It's likely both, and the ambiguity is pure Rivera. He uses this historical lineage of persecution, the Converso heritage, to frame his political radicalism not just as an ideological choice, but as an innate, blood-deep empathy with the world's proletariat. It's a very, very powerful tool for a muralist trying to create a historical vision of revolution.
So he was weaving his personal history into the much larger tapestry of revolutionary history.
Exactly. He was myth-making from day one.
So, equipped with this colossal ambition and this talent for self-mythology, he starts his formal art education very young.
10 years old. He's at the Academy of San Carlos in Mexico City. He moves quickly through the ranks, and by 1907, he receives the pivotal sponsorship from Teodoro A. de Jiménez, the governor of Veracruz, which allows him to leave for Europe to study.
He starts in Madrid, studying traditional techniques with Eduardo Chicharo, but soon, like every ambitious artist of that era, he heads to the magnetic center of modernism, Paris.
He lands in Montparnasse, which was the true heart of the avant-garde. This is where he fully immerses himself, becoming friends with the giants and contemporaries who were, literally defining the visual language of the 20th century.
We're talking about Amedeo Modigliani,
Mm-hmm.
who painted that iconic portrait of him in 1914, which is a wonderful testament to his place in that circle. He was surrounded by Chaim Soutine, the writer Ilya Ehrenberg, Moise Kissling.
That circle was incredibly tight-knit. Marie Vorobiev-Stabelska, who was known as Marevna and who was also the mother of his daughter Marika, captured the spirit of that group in her later painting, Homage to Friends from Montparnasse. It's a visual record of Rivera's bohemian intellectual immersion.
And the crucial artistic development here is his deep, deep dive into Cubism, roughly from 1913 to 1917. The painter of massive, realistic peasant figures was, for a time, a highly successful practitioner of the most abstract form of modern art.
This is so often overlooked, but it is the absolute foundation of his technical mastery. He enthusiastically embraced the fractured perspectives and geometric deconstruction of Cubism, particularly during what's called his Crystal Cubist period.
Okay.
The sources specifically mention his work Maternidad, Angelina y el Niño Diego from around 1916. And if you look at this work, it's fragmented, it's highly intellectual, it looks nothing like his famous murals.
So what's important here is how that abstract phase informed his later figurative style. How did he translate the lessons of Cubism onto a 100-foot wall?
Well, he learned two crucial things. First, the power of planar composition breaking down complex forms into simple geometric planes. And second, form simplification. Around 1917, inspired by Paul Cézanne, he consciously shifted away from fragmentation toward a post-impressionist focus on simple, large forms and vivid color. He took the intellectual structure of Cubism, the simplified plane, and he reapplied it to recognizable figures. This is what made his figures monumental, readable from a distance, and perfectly suitable for the didactic public nature of the fresco.
So Cubism gave him the structural integrity, and Cézanne gave him the color and simplified representation. That toolkit was basically complete by 1920, right as Mexico called him home.
Precisely. The Mexican ambassador to France, a man named Alberto J. Pateni, urged him to return. But before heading back to the New World, Rivera made a pilgrimage to Italy. This trip, where he studied Renaissance frescoes, was the ultimate synthesis. He saw firsthand how monumental public art could convey complex narratives to the masses. He was soaking up lessons from Giotto and Michelangelo on how to create a visual textbook of history on a wall.
So it was a very deliberate decision. He was leaving the salon art of Europe for the public art of a revolutionary state. And that sets the stage for the true birth of Diego Rivera, the political muralist.
Absolutely. Rivera returns to Mexico in 1921, right into the middle of this unprecedented cultural program, spearheaded by José Vasconcelos, who was the Minister of Education.
Right.
The nation had just gone through the devastating 1910 revolution, and the new government saw art as a tool for political and social reconstruction.
This wasn't just decorative art, was it? This was a state-sponsored effort to create a shared national history and identity for a population that was still largely illiterate. Murals were literally the visual education system for post-revolutionary Mexico.
It was propaganda in the best sense of the word, public, accessible narrative. Rivera immediately aligned himself, joining that legendary trio, José Clemente Orozco, David Alfaro Siqueiros, and Jean Charlot. But Rivera wasn't just an artist, he was a political operative from the get-go.
He ensured his political commitment was absolute.
Absolutely. In the autumn of 1922, he helped found the Revolutionary Union of Technical Workers, Painters, and Sculptors, essentially unionizing the artistic labor force. And later that same year, he officially joined the Mexican Communist Party, the PCM, and quickly secured a position on its powerful Central Committee. For Rivera, painting a communist mural was communist action.
Let's look at his very first major work when he gets back. Creation from 1922-23 in the National Preparatory School's Bolivar Auditorium. It sounds like an early baptism by fire, to say the least.
It really was. Technically, it was experimental. He painted it in encaustic, which is a wax-based medium, and that was a bit of a learning curve for him. But the real drama was the environment. The sources note he had to paint this work, which included classical allegories and some nascent radical themes, while literally guarding himself with a pistol against violently opposed right-wing students.
Painting with a gun in your belt. I mean, that level of artistic and personal confrontation just sets the tone for his entire career. He was asserting from day one that art was a dangerous revolutionary act.
And this early confrontation solidified his shift away from the experimental European techniques he was using and toward the traditional, enduring medium of fresco. He settled into a strictly fresco style after this, which allowed him to develop the native aesthetic he's really known for.
That native style, which we see fully developed later, is so deeply rooted in these clear Aztec and indigenous influences.
Yes, the figures are large, they're simplified, and they're planar, which is a direct application of his Cubist lessons. But they're integrated into these complex, flowing narratives with bold, vivid colors that completely reject the muted tones of classical European art. He was creating a visual language of the people, drawing on his claims of Amerindian heritage to reflect the ideals of the 1910 revolution.
And the scale of his next big work at the Secretariat of Public Education, or SEP, is almost unimaginable.
It really is. This project, which began in 1922 and was finished in 1928, involved painting a staggering 124 frescoes across 3 massive floors and 2 courtyards of the Secretariat building.
124.
To put that into perspective, this wasn't just one painting. It was an entire gallery, a visual encyclopedia of Mexican labor, industry, peasant life, and historical conflict.
He divided the space logically, didn't he? One courtyard focused on labor and industry, the other on rural life and festivals.
Exactly. They depict everything from mining and sugarcane production to indigenous rituals and modern machinery. This body of work, taken together, established his mastery of the fresco technique and his political vision as the ultimate chronicler of the Mexican working class. It absolutely cemented his reputation.
But the place where he truly merged the political, the symbolic, and the deeply personal, almost replacing religious doctrine with revolutionary fervor, is the Chapingo Autonomous University of Agriculture, specifically the chapel there.
The Chapingo murals, or Tierra Fecundada, which means fertile land, painted from 1923 to 1927, are a true deep dive into his worldview. The setting, an agricultural college, is so crucial. He transformed a former chapel, a place of Christian worship, into a temple dedicated to the revolution, to land reform, and to Marxist ideology.
So the political symbolism here is not subtle, it's militant.
It's absolutely unapologetic. The mural boldly depicts the revolutionary struggles of the peasant and working classes. In the soffit, high above, you see a hammer and sickle joined by a star. The composition includes a figure clearly labeled by some critics as a propagandist, who is pointing directly at another hammer and sickle. This is militant visual communism occupying a space traditionally reserved for the sacred.
And he infuses that Marxist framework with ancient indigenous myth. That synthesis is truly powerful.
He creates a new revolutionary theology. The inclusion of the woman holding corn, as the critic Antonio Rodriguez noted, is so powerfully evocative of the Aztec goddess of maize. The revolution, therefore, is not some foreign ideology. It is the spiritual, indigenous continuation of Mexico's destiny, replacing Catholic iconography with the divinity of the land and of labor.
And then you have the personal insertions. He doesn't shy away from using his own family and relationships to populate this grand narrative.
No, he personalizes the cost and the reward of the revolution. He depicts the bodies of revolutionary heroes, Emiliano Zapata and Otilio Montano, buried in graves, explicitly showing that their sacrifice is what fertilizes the cornfield of the future nation. The dead feed the living. It's a very potent, very direct metaphor.
And right there, amongst the sacrifice and the promise of rebirth, is his own personal life.
He depicts his second wife, Guadalupe Marin, as a fertile, nude goddess, symbolizing the promise of the land and the revolution's future. He also includes their daughter, Guadalupe Rivera y Marin, as a cherub. Rivera places his own domestic life, his wife, his child, his relationships, directly into the center of national mythology. He's equating his personal fertility and creation with the fertility of the revolutionary state.
It's an act of monumental ego and artistic integration.
It is.
And that willingness to blend the political narrative, the historical record, and his very volatile personal life is the thread that runs through everything he did. It makes it impossible to separate the man from the movement, which brings us, I think, to the chaos of his private world.
Yes. Rivera's artistic output was characterized by immense discipline and scale, but his romantic life was is characterized by overlapping relationships, intense passion, and frequently outright volatility. He had 4 official marriages and several significant partners.
So let's just follow the timeline of wives, starting back in Paris. His first marriage was to the Russian artist Angelina Belov from 1911 to 1921.
Right. Belov was deeply involved in his Cubist period. They had a son, Diego, but tragically the boy died very young, between 1916 and 1918. And crucially, during this marriage, Rivera was also involved with the painter Maria Vorobiev-Stabelska, who we mentioned, Marevna, with whom he had a daughter, Mariko Rivera, in 1918 or 1919. So already the personal complications were stacking up before he even left Europe.
He divorces Belov after returning to Mexico and very quickly, in June 1922, marries Guadalupe Marin, who, as we just discussed, was immortalized as that fertile goddess in the Chapingo murals.
Marin was a novelist and an equally strong personality. They had 2 daughters, Ruth and Guadalupe, but divorced by 1928, which then paved the way for the relationship that overshadows all others.
Frida Kahlo. He marries her in August 1929. The age difference alone, he was 42, she was 22, was controversial, but it was the mutual tempestuousness that defined them.
Their bond was legendary. It's often described as a relationship built on shared art, shared politics, and constant emotional warfare. The sources explicitly highlight their mutual infidelities and his violent temper as key drivers that eventually led to their first divorce in 1939.
But the connection was just too strong to break completely.
That's right. They remarried in San Francisco on December 8, 1940, which was his 54th birthday. They remained married until her death in 1954, despite the continued volatility. And their relationship wasn't just domestic, it was intensely political, as evidenced by the fact that the exiled Leon Trotsky and his wife lived with them for several months in Mexico.
That must have been an absolute pressure cooker. 2 revolutionary artists, a political assassin seeking asylum, and the highest-profile exiled communist revolutionary, all under one roof.
The house was a hub of global leftist ideology. It really highlights that Rivera's personal choices, even who he married, were often deeply intertwined with his political mission. And then finally, after Kahlo's death, he married his agent, Emma Hurtado, in 1955. She was his 4th and final wife.
Now, let's pivot to the most sensational and frankly bizarre claim from his 1960 posthumously published autobiography, My Art, My Life. This is the moment that strains all credulity and demands analytical scrutiny. The claim of cannibalism.
The specific account details an alleged incident from 1904 when he was just 18 years old and a student in Mexico. He wrote that he and some friends engaged in cannibalism, claiming they pooled money to purchase cadavers from the city morgue.
And the detail he includes is truly shocking and seems designed purely for provocation.
Oh, absolutely. He describes specifically relishing women's brains in vinaigrette. It's a horrific, specific, and totally unforgettable image.
Okay, we have to pause here because the source material is very clear about this. This claim is widely regarded as factually suspect or an elaborate lie. It sounds like self-mythologizing taken to a perverse, almost pathological extreme.
It absolutely is. But the function of the lie is what we need to analyze. Why would he publish this? The answer lies in the radical rationalist justification he offered for it.
What was his defense for this supposed act?
He framed it as an anti-superstition manifesto. He wrote that he believed that, and I'm quoting again, when man evolves a civilization higher than the mechanized but still primitive one he has now, the eating of human flesh will be sanctioned. For then man will have thrown off all of his superstitions and irrational taboos.
Okay, let's unpack that. That is a deeply provocative statement. He's arguing that cannibalism is morally neutral, that it's just a custom that will be discarded, like religion. He's using this ultimate taboo subject to attack the larger concept of superstition, which for him included all organized religion and all bourgeois morality.
Precisely. For the revolutionary materialist, there is no innate spiritual quality to the human body after death. It's just matter. Therefore, the prohibition against cannibalism is just another irrational bourgeois taboo, like the taboo against communism or atheism. By claiming to have done this, he positions himself as the ultimate intellectual vanguard, the man who has already shed humanity's primitive emotional restraints.
It's the ultimate ideological provocation against the establishment.
It is.
And that use of extremity to defend his atheism perfectly transitions into the next section, his public, often confrontational, political, and philosophical beliefs.
Rivera was fundamentally a materialist, an uncompromising atheist, and he saw his murals as ideological weapons. He never ever backed down from using them to challenge the deepest held beliefs of Catholic Mexico.
The most famous clash involving his atheism centers around his massive 1947 mural, Dreams of a Sunday Afternoon in the Alameda Park. The mural is an incredible historical panorama of Mexico, but the firestorm it caused was focused entirely on a single phrase.
Yes, this section depicting the 19th century intellectual Ignacio Ramirez. In the mural, Ramirez is holding a sign that read, simply, Dios no existe, God does not exist.
This was in the late 1940s in a deeply Catholic country. The public furor was instantaneous and immense. The backlash was so strong that the mural was physically hidden from view for a startling 9 years.
Just think about that. It speaks to the sheer power of his art. It was literally dangerous enough to be censored by being covered with a blanket. It was only brought back after Rivera reluctantly agreed to remove the inscription.
But when he was pressured to hide behind Ramirez and claim the phrase was just a historical quote, Rivera refused to obfuscate his personal beliefs. He issued that famous, defiant declaration,
saying, to affirm God does not exist, I do not have to hide behind Don Ignacio Ramirez. I am an atheist and I consider religions to be a form of collective neurosis. He refused to surrender the ideological point, even while compromising on the physical painting.
And beyond religion, his politics were equally inflammatory and led to his expulsion from the Mexican Communist Party in 1929.
He was a major figure in the PCM, holding a spot on the Central Committee. But his downfall was rooted in the escalating, vicious political infighting of global communism. He was expelled due to suspected Trotskyite sympathies, especially in the wake of the assassination of former President Álvaro Obregón.
And the sources mention a really complex incident involving his 1928 mural in the Arsenal that seemed to directly implicate him in the political tensions of the time.
It did. That mural featured prominent communist figures, including the photographer Tina Madani, the Cuban student leader Julio Antonio Mella, and the Italian Vittorio Vidali.
Right.
Now, Mella was murdered in January 1929, shot dead on the streets of Mexico City. Vidali, who was Mella's contemporary and rival, was widely suspected of being a Stalinist assassin operating within Mexico.
So Rivera's issue was that he had prominently painted Vidali in the mural, handing a rifle to a worker right alongside Mella. The resulting accusation from his rivals was devastating. That due to his connections and the timing of it all, Rivera had advanced knowledge of the planned attack, or was at least too closely aligned with the Stalinist faction responsible for the assassination.
Right.
This violent political firestorm, this Stalinist-Trotskyite split, was one of the main factors pushing him out of the party, leading to his eventual open alliance with Trotsky.
So he's too independent and politically impure for the orthodox communists. But here's the most baffling ideological turn. He was also involved in an occult organization, the ancient mystical order Rosicrucis, or AMRC.
Wait, so a militant materialist, a communist, joins an occult organization? How does that even compute?
This is where his capacity for contradiction becomes truly phenomenal. In 1926, Rivera became a card-carrying member of AMRC, which is a modern Rosicrucian occult organization.
That seems utterly incompatible with a man who claimed to be a militant materialist and called all religion a collective neurosis.
It does. But he didn't just join passively. He helped found the Mexico City Lodge, naming it Quetzalcoatl, after the indigenous Mesoamerican god, and he even painted an image of this very god for the local temple. He was fusing the occult, indigenous mythology, and global leftist politics into one chaotic worldview.
So how on earth did he justify this membership later, especially when he was trying to be readmitted to the Communist Party, which strictly excluded Freemasons and similar occult groups?
Well, in 1954, when he sought readmission to the PCM, he had to mount a defense, and his argument was a masterpiece of political spin and self-aggrandizement. He claimed his AMRC membership was purely tactical. He joined, he asserted, to infiltrate the organization, which he called a typical Yankee group on behalf of communism.
An artistic political double agent fighting the bourgeois influence from within the occult.
You got it. And furthermore, he gave this highly personalized, materialist interpretation of AORC philosophy to make it acceptable to the party. He insisted AORC was essentially materialist, claiming it admitted only different states of energy and matter, and that its true origins lay not in mystical tradition, but in ancient Egyptian occult knowledge, derived from Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti.
In other words, he redefined the occult as a kind of proto-science. He was saying, I wasn't doing mysticism, I was researching ancient material science for the revolution.
That's precisely the move. This defense just underscores how he consistently tried to align every single part of his life with his overriding radical political identity.
And that radical political vision was about to be put to the ultimate test when he took his monumental art and controversial ideas directly into the heart of American capitalism.
Rivera's career in the United States, which started in 1930, began with just unprecedented success and immediate recognition of his genius. This wasn't just success for a Mexican artist, it was recognition for a global figure.
In November 1931, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, MoMA, held a retrospective exhibition of his work. I mean, this was a monumental achievement for a living artist at the time. It confirmed his status in the international avant-garde.
Following that, he was immediately commissioned for significant work in San Francisco, invited by the architect Timothy L. Pfluger. Pfluger was a major patron who really recognized Rivera's genius for integrating art into modern architecture. Rivera painted a mural for the City Club of the San Francisco Stock Exchange for a substantial fee of $2,500, and another fresco for the California School of Fine Art.
He was keenly aware of incorporating American life into his art from the start, demonstrating a kind of cultural synthesis.
He was. For the City Club mural, for instance, the American tennis star Helen Wills modeled for him. He was engaging directly with the culture, showing that his vision wasn't just for Mexico, it was Pan-American. The stage was set for his most famous existing American work, the Detroit Industry Murals.
This was a colossal commission. 27 fresco panels completed between 1932 and 1933 for the Detroit Institute of Arts.
And this project was partially funded by Edsel Ford, the son of Henry Ford. The irony, as you noted, is just so thick. The radical communist muralist being paid by the ultimate sign of American industrial capitalism to celebrate industry.
So the subject matter, Detroit Industry, is this incredible visual poem to the Ford Motor Company's River Rouge plant. What did Rivera focus on visually?
He celebrated the machines and the labor in equal measure. The murals are incredibly dynamic, showing the workers, the engineers, the machinery of the assembly line, everything from the stamping of car bodies to the application of paint. Visually, he juxtaposes the raw materials of nature, earth, and ore with the finished technological product. What makes him so powerful is the visual contrast between the powerful, sometimes frightening, machinery and the dignified, plainer faces of the workers, often depicted across different races, working together.
And the political tension was apparent even in the finished work, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. His depiction of the foundry workers and the sheer scale of the labor implied a reverence for the proletariat that made the wealthy patrons distinctly uneasy. That tension never dissipated. We see this decades later, during the anti-communist fervor of the 1950s, the McCarthy era. The sources recall that a large sign had to be placed at the Detroit Institute of Arts defending the artistic merit of the murals while explicitly condemning his politics as detestable.
So the artwork was protected, but only through public ideological distancing.
Exactly.
And if Detroit was subtle tension, New York was an explosion. Let's move to the most famous act of art destruction in modern American history, the Rockefeller Center scandal.
In 1933, John D. Rockefeller Jr., perhaps the most powerful patron of the age, commissioned Rivera to paint a massive three-paneled mural for the centerpiece of his new global complex, Rockefeller Center. The mural was titled Man at the Crossroads.
And Rivera was tasked with depicting humanity choosing between competing forces shaping the modern world, which he interpreted as a clear choice between capitalism and the collective future of communism.
Rivera did not disappoint. True to his mission, he ensured his Marxist vision was impossible to ignore. The central conflict arose because, in his design, he included a powerful portrait of Vladimir Lenin, the former Soviet leader, linking hands with workers, surrounded by clear Marxist pro-worker content.
In 1933 New York, with the Great Depression raging and anti-communism on the rise, painting Lenin in the center of the Rockefeller Empire was basically an act of war.
It was pure hubris. The reaction from Rockefeller's son, the press, and the public was instantaneous and overwhelmingly hostile. Rockefeller Jr. sent a letter demanding that Rivera remove the portrait of Lenin.
And Rivera's reaction to a demand from his immensely powerful patron.
Total defiance. He refused, stating he would not mutilate the artwork. He offered a compromise. He would, if they insisted, balance Lenin's image with a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, but he would not remove the Soviet leader. This was not enough for the Rockefellers.
Let's just linger on that moment. I mean, imagine the scene. The artist, standing on the scaffold, refusing the demands of the man paying him, demanding artistic integrity over financial expediency. It's almost impossible to believe a patron like Rockefeller would tolerate that.
They didn't. It was the ultimate showdown between art and capital. The decision was made. The management company ordered the immediate destruction of the mural. And though rumors persist that the fresco was simply covered over, the sources confirm the artwork was physically chipped away and destroyed. Rivera was immediately ordered to leave the United States.
It's astonishing how quickly his immense success was undone by one unyielding political choice.
The fallout was swift. Officials in Chicago, recognizing the political toxicity, promptly canceled their commission for Rivera to paint a mural for the Chicago World's Fair. Rivera, however, did not lose his defiant spirit. He released a statement asserting that since he had been paid his fee in full before the destruction, he would use that remaining money to repaint the mural over and over until the funds ran out.
And he followed through on that threat, didn't he?
He did. The next year, 1934, he recreated the work in Mexico City's Palacio de Bellas Artes, renaming it Man, Controller of the Universe. The recreation, in an act of pure artistic vengeance, was even more radical.
How did the recreation differ visually?
It was a clear middle finger to his American patrons. The central figure of Lenin was maintained, but he added even more revolutionary figures who had been excluded from the original, including Leon Trotsky, Friedrich Engels, and Karl Marx. He was ensuring that the destruction of the first version only amplified the political message of the second.
The cultural impact of this event was so significant that it immediately spawned literary responses.
Oh, yes. It immediately entered the cultural conversation. Archibald MacLeish wrote a series of 6 irony-laden poems reflecting on the fate of the mural. And perhaps the most lasting cultural comment came from E.B. White in The New Yorker, with his light poem, I Paint What I See, a ballad of artistic integrity, which just perfectly captured Rivera's principled, if destructive, stance.
Despite being exiled from the U.S., he returned one last time in 1940, again at the invitation of his unwavering San Francisco patron, Timothy L. Pfluger.
This was for the Golden Gate International Exposition. Rivera painted a massive, continuous 10-panel work called Pan-American Unity. And this mural really embodies his final, expansive vision of a North and South American cultural synthesis.
And the process itself was part of the spectacle.
He painted Pan-American Unity in front of exhibition attendees, making the creation of the work a public performance, almost like a Renaissance master demonstrating his skill. He earned a very good fee for it, $1,000 per month plus expenses. The work itself features a who's who of his contemporary life and political interests.
He included Pfluger's architecture, portraits of Frida Kahlo, woodcarver Dudley C. Carter, and the actress Paulette Goddard.
And importantly, he continued his work with the American scene. His assistant on this project was Thelma Johnson Street, who was a pioneer African-American artist, dancer, and textile designer. The mural, now a landmark for City College of San Francisco, serves as his final, massive statement on the relationship between the Americas.
Rivera's later career then solidified his legacy not just as a political chronicler, but as an enduring iconographer of Mexican popular culture, often by elevating figures from folk tradition to monumental status.
Exactly. And the prime example of that is his masterpiece, A Dream of a Sunday Afternoon in the Alameda Park, painted between 1946 and 1947. This mural is a historical pageant, but its enduring legacy is tied to one specific figure.
The figure of La Calavera Catrina, this iconic skeletal woman adorned with a grand European-style hat, has become the most recognized visual symbol of the Mexican Day of the Dead celebration globally.
Right, but the figure wasn't his creation.
No, it wasn't.
La Calavera Catrina originated with the satirical printmaker José Guadalupe Posada. Posada used the figure to mock Mexican elites who were adopting European fashions while denying their indigenous roots. Rivera took this satirical figure and just transformed her.
How did his transformation change her meaning?
He gave her nationalist, indigenous features, shifting her function from a mere critique of the elite to a broader, more complex icon of the nation, grappling with mortality and identity. By placing her center stage, often linking arms with his own childhood self, he cemented her status as an enduring icon of Mexican identity and the Day of the Dead tradition. It really demonstrates his power to elevate folk art to high art.
And the controversy that surrounded him in life has certainly not diminished his financial value since his death in 1957.
Far from it. His work retains staggering financial importance. The sources highlight that his 1931 painting, The Rivals, sold for $9.76 million in 2018. This set the auction record for the highest price achieved by a Latin American artist, reinforcing his position not just as a cultural figure, but as an economic powerhouse in the global art market.
And the inherent drama of his life, the clashes with Kahlo, the political purges, the destruction of the Rockefeller mural, it all ensures his narrative continues to be told across different media.
He's a ready-made character for film and literature. He was portrayed by Ruben Blades in Tim Robbins' film Cradle Will Rock in 1999, which focused heavily on the New York political scene. And of course, most famously, by Alfred Molina in the 2002 film Frida, opposite Salma Hayek.
He and Kahlo have also been major literary subjects.
They are central characters in Barbara Kingsolver's novel The Lacuna, and the enduring cultural memory of the Rockefeller scandal continues to be revisited. The Netflix series Sense8, for example, featured a scene set in the Anahuacalli Museum where characters explicitly discuss the destroyed Rockefeller sketch, demonstrating that even the gaps in his catalog, the works that were destroyed, remain culturally relevant and actively discussed today.
And a large part of how we understand Rivera today is due to his control of his own narrative, facilitated by his posthumously published autobiography.
My Art, My Life, an autobiography published in 1960, is crucial. Gladys March compiled this from years of interviews, giving us his interpretations, often biased and self-serving, of his life and art. While we approach it critically, as we must with the cannibalism claims, it is the source material for the myth of Diego Rivera, written in his own words, shaping his legacy right down to the most unbelievable, shocking details.
We've covered a life so dense and so explosive, it's hard to imagine it all belonging to one man. He truly was the master of synthesis, taking opposites and forcing them together in the massive canvas of his life and his art.
If we look at that synthesis, it's remarkable. Technically, he mastered the highly intellectual abstract lessons of European modernism, Cubism, and then applied that structural rigor to the monumental narrative scale of the Renaissance fresco tradition. He used the fragmented lessons of Paris to create the simplified, powerful visual language of the Aztecs.
And ideologically, he took monumental public art, which traditionally served the most conservative institutions like the church or the state, and used it to broadcast the most radical, anti-establishment messages possible. Portraits of Lenin, depictions of communist struggle, and militant, uncompromising atheism.
And personally, he lived a chaotic life defined by overlapping marriages, emotional temper, and bizarre philosophical claims like tactical infiltration of the occult and purported cannibalism. Yet throughout all of this, he maintained an incredibly disciplined, lifelong dedication to his vast, complex frescoes, continuing to paint right until his death.
So we circle back to the central question. The Mexican government declared his works monumentos históricos, sacred national artistic monuments. They sanctified the art.
Which raises an important question, something for you, the listener, to carry forward and consider. What does it mean for a country to reconcile the artistic masterpiece with the radical, revolutionary, and ardently atheist ideology that the art often expresses? Can a nation truly celebrate the frescoes that champion the proletariat and indigenous history, while the artists who created them openly defied the very concepts of religious and social normalcy?
It seems like the only way to truly appreciate the enduring figure of Diego Rivera is to accept that the contradiction is the art. The tension, the chaos, and the radical political commitment are inseparable from the technical brilliance on the wall. If you want to appreciate his incredible financial legacy, look up the painting, The Rivals, the one that holds the Latin American art auction record. It's a moment of stunning color and form, momentarily detached from the political chaos.
But rest assured, the politics, as always with Rivera, are right there just beneath the surface.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the monumental, volatile world of Diego Rivera. We hope you feel thoroughly informed and perhaps more than a little provoked.